Hello, Uki Bandit. So this is Theory for Ukulele Part 3, and we're going to be looking at chords. So in the last video we talked about scales, and we learned that scale is an organised pattern of notes, and the most important scale to learn is C. A lot of the chords that you learn at the very beginning will be in the key of C, or using the scale of C. And so C, A minor, F, G, which is your first 4 chords that you'd normally learn, a lot of the songs you'll be learning will be using those chords. So if you learn the scale of C, you're kind of equipping yourself to play the riffs and melodies that accompany those songs, or even be able to embellish the chords that you're learning in the key with the scale. And I gave a few of examples in a follow-up video with that, so you've got some ideas of what that means with the riffs and scales. But we're going to be looking at chords and what they are and how they're made up. So first of all, what is a chord? Well, a chord is, it's more than one note put together. It's actually 3 or more notes put together. So if we were to put 2 notes together, this would be called a harmony. So when we harmonize, we're harmonizing by playing one note and then another note's being played, a different note, and that will create a harmony effect. Now if it's a nice sounding harmony, it's called harmonious, and if it's 2 notes that don't sound very nice together, it's usually called disharmony or disharmonious. And the idea is, or dissonant is another word that's used. And so the point is that if we hear those 2 notes and we know that they're harmonious and they're pleasing to the ears, we're more likely to use them in a piece of music. Now chords are when we place 3 together, and they normally called a triad when we place 3 notes together. And a chord is just basically when we play 3 or more notes together. So if we were to put 3 notes together from that C major scale, it would either be harmonious or dissonant or disharmonious, and depending on how it sounded. But it's been worked out for us already many centuries ago, patterns that are sounding harmonious that were used, and it means that we can go straight to learning these chords straight away that we know sound good and will work. And that's what a lot of our music is made up of. So if we look at the C major scale, which I've got here, you've got the C, D, F, G, A, B, C, and I've numbered them 1 to 8. And obviously this is, we've done this in the last video, this is just so that when we start talking about the chords we can relate it to what we already know. So we know the C major scale is 8 notes, and they're the notes that we use. And if we're going to play a chord, we know that it contains 3 or more notes, and the idea is that we're going to work out which ones in the scale of C are the ones that we need to learn. So the idea is we're going to first of all harmonize some of these notes. The first one will be the chord of C. So if I was to do the C chord, for example, to start with, so there's the C chord, and we're going to look at the first note, which is going to be the root, the C. We always use the first note, which is the one that names the chord. That's what the root note is. And then we're going to add the 3rd one, and then we're going to add the 5th one of the scale. And that is what our C major chord is made up of. It's made up of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th of the scale. And the idea is that if we were to look at the ukulele, we can see that this note is a G, then we've got a C, then we've got an E, and this note that we're fingering here is a C as well. We're on the A string, A sharp, B, C, there's a C. So we know that all these notes when we play the chord of C are made up of those notes, C, E, and G, 3 notes. And if we were to look at the scale up here, and if I was to put C, D, E together, like the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, that wouldn't sound good. I could give you a little example. C is there, E's there, but we've got D here. Yeah, that doesn't sound so good. I mean, it doesn't sound like horror movie type stuff, but it does sound pretty bad. It doesn't sound as pleasing to the ear. But when these notes, it was discovered a long time ago, when these notes are separated, when you skip over a note in the scale and then skip over another note, which is basically going up in threes, that space in between the notes, the space in between the sound, makes it more pleasing to the ear. And it's just because those vibrations are separated a certain way, and if those vibrations are all very close to each other, our ear finds it difficult to separate the sounds, and that's what causes that harshness. So a bit of science there, but we don't really need to know that. We just need to know which ones are in the key of C. So C chord, C, E and G, That's how we make that chord. Now all we do to make the rest of the chords, to learn what the notes are in the rest of the chords, is go up to the next note, which is D, and this one is actually called D minor, and I will explain that in a little bit, but I'm going to go through the whole key first of all so you can see the notes, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to highlight the D, skip a note, skip play F, skip a note A. So then the three notes that we're looking at are D, F and A for D minor. We're going to do the same for E, and it will be, this is actually E minor as well. Like I said, I will explain the whole method behind major and minor in a minute. Here we've got E, we're going to skip a note, G, and skip a note, B. The next one is the F chord, and this one is F, A and C, and we're going to then go to the G chord, and this one is G, B and D. Then we're going to go to A minor. So you would probably, if you've learnt a few chords already, you'll recognise all these chords being the first chords you would learn, and now you can see why. You can see that we talked about the whole idea of all the open notes being constructed of all the notes in this scale range, which is why that scale is the most appropriate and the best sounding scale, and so these chords will be the most appropriate chords. So we start on the A, which is a 6, we skip the B, so we're going to go to the 8, which is the C, play the right note, and then we're going to go to E, A, C and E, ace. So A, C and E, that's your A minor, and then the last one is an odd one. It's actually called B diminished, and there's variations of this chord, but the theory is that we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to go B, skip 1, D, skip 1, F. Okay, now you can see there's a pattern there. The pattern is that whatever note we start on, we skip in thirds, and we only go up 3 notes, and that creates our chords. That's the chords from the key of C. So that's why that scale and those chords are compatible, because the chords are actually made out of the notes of the scale, but they're harmonized in patterns of 3. And how you construct them is you start on the root note of the chord, and then you go up skipping the 3 notes in a row, so going from 1, 3 and 5 for the C, and for the D, F and A where we went the 2, 4 and 6, etc, etc, and you do that for all of them. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously the best thing to do is just kind of look at that and try and work it out for yourself. You've got the 8 notes, and you can pick one of these chords and look at what numbers they are, and then you can see how that is basically that pattern is occurring. And once you see the pattern, you'll kind of have a bit of a better understanding on basically how these chords are put together and why they're put together the way they are. The thing that can be confusing, which is our next step, is what are major, minor and diminished. So that's what we'll talk about now. Hello, so for our second part of our epic adventure into understanding chords, we're going to look at the naming of the chords, so major, minor, diminished, and why they're called what they're called. So here we look at C major, which is C, E and G, and usually the major is abbreviated just to a C, so you know it's a C major chord when you see just the letter name, and we know it's taken from the C major scale 1, 3, 5. So if we go down here, this is my C chord, C, E, G, 1, 3, 5, and that's C major. Now to make it a minor, to make it C minor, we're minusing 1 note, and that's what the minor means. It means that we're taking something away from that original chord. Now all you have to do is decide which note it is we need to minor, and it's the 3rd note. If you take the 3, which is the E, and flatten it, in other words move it, shift it back down 1 note, so instead of an E it becomes an E flat, we get C, E flat and G, which is C minor. So let me write this down. So we get our C minor, and we are going to have a C, an E flat and a G, and what we've done is we've got our first note, and then we've flattened, if I get it the right one, it's the flattened small beat, flattened the third, and then we've got our fifth. So that is what we call a chord formula. The chord formula is just the notes, or the intervals of the notes that are going to be used to make a chord. And intervals just the step between. These are the scale intervals up here. So we know that 1, 3, 5 is C, E, and G, and we know that C minor is C, E flat, and G. To make the diminished chord, we're going to go one further. So we've minus something. We've taken one note away, which is the third, to make it a minor chord. To diminish a chord, we're going to take a third and the fifth away. So we're going to flatten the third and flatten the fifth. Now you think of that then as it's diminishing. It's further away from the original tonality, the original chord, than before, which is why it's called a diminished. It's diminished from the original tonality. So if I was to make this a C diminished, that's usually abbreviated to C dim. Sometimes I have a little circle as well to represent C diminished as well. Let's just do it like that, and we're going to give you the fact that we know it's C and we know it's E flat because we've got a flattened third, and then we're going to flatten the fifth note, which is G flat as well, and this gives us our chord formula of 1, and then we're going to flat 3 and then flat 5. Shift that along so it looks a little bit more orderly. There you go. So first of all, we start with our C chord, and then we go to our C minor chord by flattening the E to an E flat, and then to make it C diminished, we'd have to flatten the G to make it a G flat. And that's how major, minor, and diminished chords get their name and how they're organized. So let me look at this now on the ukulele. So if I wanted to make those chords in ukulele, and this is why this is really, really useful, and I don't really often ever look at a chord symbol because I usually know the order of notes that should be in a chord. So in my head I can work out what notes I'm changing to make a major, a minor, and a diminished, or other chords like sevenths and all these other chords that you'll get written down. That is given me. So if it was C diminished written down, I would know that it's C with a flattened third and a flattened fifth, and I can look at the guitar neck, know where those notes are because I've learnt the notes, and then change my shape accordingly to that chord. Now obviously I realise that we rely on those chord shapes quite a lot when we're first learning, so that we are learning where the shapes and the patterns are. But as you get comfortable with those chords, and you don't need to look at your fingers to see where C or a G or an F, learning to make those slight adjustments, moving one note back and learning to move the notes around, really helps you figure out a lot of chords that you otherwise would have scratched your head and look through the chart for. So if you know a C major, you haven't got to do a lot to make it a C minor because it's only one note back, but you need to know where they are obviously on the neck. So I've made a little diagram, and I'll shift this across. So this is my diagram, and you can see here I've got my C major, which we know, the C chord. We can relate to that. We know that's really easy. This is what a C minor chord would look like, and this is what a C diminished chord would look like. So as you can see, they're not terribly difficult shapes. In fact, if you look at the C diminished, it's like a G7 shape moved up one. A C minor just holding across the strings first I've got on the third fret on the first string, second and third there. And that's a nice easy way of playing a C minor. If you'd have seen that written down like C minor without the chord shape, and you didn't know it, obviously you would have no other way of understanding how to play it unless you knew which notes to change. And I understand that can be a little bit complex, but just if you work through it very slowly and just work on, even if it's just one chord, things start to click, and the penny starts to drop, if you like. So what we're going to look at is this C chord. We're going to play a C chord. So this is a C chord, and our notes are accordingly. We've got our G string, we've got our C, we've got our E, and then at the bottom we've got another C. So C, E and G. There's our C, E and G notes. So we know that we've got a chord of C, and And we can have as many, if you take for example a piano or a guitar, you can have as many C, E's and G's as you like. It doesn't matter how many C's or E's or G's or where you put them, it's a C chord as long as there's C, E and G involved. So for the next chord, if we were to play a C minor, all we've got to do is change the E to E flat, but this open E string here is a problem because I can't go back any further. I've got it's an open E. So what I have to do is find that E on another string, basically. So what we're going to do is we're going to play our C, and now this open E, we can't have this. So instead of the open E, I'm going to lay it across, so I'm covering the G. So the G on the 3rd fret on the 2nd string, E, F, F sharp, G, there's a G. Now we know we need a G for C, so I'm going to cover that note. And then if I raise my finger one more, I'm going to cover the 3rd fret on that 3rd string, which is a C string. Now the reason I'm doing that is because if I count it up to that 3rd fret, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, or E flat. So as we talked about before in the scales or the chromatic, when we talked about the chromatic scale, if you go up you go sharp, you go back you go flat, but we're flattening the E. So this technically, if you go up C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, if we go up to the 4th fret, that note is an E, and we go back one to make our E flat. And so because we can't use the open note, we're making the E flat there. So now I've got my C, G and my E flat, and I can play that all the way from the top as well, because this string here is a G. So I can use that note as well because a G is in the chord of C minor. So we've got our G, E flat, then we've got our G again on that 2nd string, and then the C. So there you go, I've got a C minor chord constructed from taking the C chord and just knowing what notes to shift. I know I've just got to change it, I've got to have an E flat instead of an E. Some chords are easier than that because you can go back one. So I think we looked at this a bit earlier when we looked at A major and A minor. So if you look at A major, so there's that 1st finger on that note, and to make it an A minor, you can just lift off. So if you know an A major and A minor, you can see it's just one note difference, and that note that's changing is the one that's moved back. So that must be the 3rd note in a A major or an A minor chord from its scale, if you like. So anyway, so we've looked at C major. Now we've got C minor. Now we've got our E flat already, which is on this 3rd fret on the C string. All we need to do now is move the G, which we've got here on the 3rd fret, to a G flat. So I move it back one, and that gives me like that 7th shape that you can see, that triangular shape. And that is our C diminished. So we've gone from C to C minor to C diminished. And that's how we get our major, minor and diminished chords. You can hear what they sound like. So we've got a very happy sound in C, and then a sadder sound in C minor, or a darker sound in C minor. And then we've got our diminished, which slightly on edge, that one. We hear that for the Tom and Jerry falling down the stairs. So, or sometimes you hear it in horror music, really high up, high pitches. A little bit on edge, that sound diminished. But we do hear it as a passing chord in a lot of pop songs. So occasionally it crops up. You hear it sometimes in sort of George Formby stuff. So we you know, you got it. So you hear these little passing diminished runs, and you hear it in some pop songs as well, and jazz songs as well. And generally it's not a chord you will sit on, but it'll be one that you play in between the chords in the key. So if you don't know it, it can throw you for the particular song you're learning. So it's worthwhile having at least a little bit of an understanding of the shape that you need to be able to play. So that shape's quite useful for that. So there you go, we've got our major, minor and diminished chords, and the idea is that we're just learning what a major, a minor and diminished is, and what the components are, and how that relates to the scale. And to start off with, you just need to know all the chords in C, understand how to play those to start with, and if you can have a little bit more knowledge and understand how each chord's made up, eventually it may lead you to working chords out while you're playing, or when you look at a sheet, rather than trying to find a chord sheet, you can kind of figure it out using that theory. But that may take some time, so practice it slowly and keep coming back to it if you need to. And I'll see you again for the next epic adventure of our theory for ukulele. Take it easy.